Investor Ideas Climate Change and Clean Tech podcast, following climate news and solutions. Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com Climate Change and Clean Tech podcast. I'm Taylor Van Zandt, the host of InvestorIdeas.com Cannabis podcast and the host of today's edition of Climate Change and Clean Tech. Today I'm interviewing Chad Schofield, the owner and founder of BioGen Ag Systems, an agricultural machinery and equipment manufacturer and research development firm who invents and implements industrial quality solutions to problems faced by farmers, ranchers, organizations, and emergency response personnel related to agricultural shortages and natural resource depletion during emergencies. Supporting the USDA's mission, BioGen Ag Systems safeguards ag animals for human supply to help rural economies by saving ag livelihood. Chris and I discussed BioGen Ag's equipment and current mission, as well as the future of farming in the U.S. and across the globe as farmers face harsher seasons and growing natural disasters each year. So today I'm here with Chad Schofield, who is the founder and owner of BioGen Ag Systems. Chad, it's great to have you on here. Could you tell me a little bit about your story and how you got into this area? I know you were in the tech industry more before, and now you're in agriculture. So could you talk a little bit about that and BioGen Ag?
Yeah. I'm actually originally from Philadelphia, where I was knee-deep in computers and networking, and I happened to be kind of fortunate and was able to retire early in my life. And then my wife became pregnant with our first child, and so that changed my retirement plan. And so we actually ended up selling everything we had in the Philadelphia area and moved out to Kansas to be near my wife's parents. When I was out here, I had some land, and I was getting a little bored. I didn't know what to do. I was used to being busy. And so I noticed that other people had cattle, so I went out and purchased some cattle, and I bought 6 to start with, and within 3.5 years, I had over 200, and then I was crop farming some land, and I was also haying about 500 acres of ground. And then Kansas and the rest of the prairie states went through a bad drought right around 2012. And I was giving all my hay away out to Dodge City to try and help those farmers save their herds. And I realized as the last truck was driving away and I was still getting phone calls from farmers asking for help that was just not going to be enough. So I decided I was going to dive into ag technology and sort of create solutions for farmers and ranchers who are in distressed situations. And that's how BioGen Ag Systems was born.
That's a fantastic story. And I like that that's a very relatable story right now because we're seeing floodplains all over. I mean, in Canada, it's happening everywhere. In different parts of the world, everyone's getting hit by this right now. And so I see that as a real problem.
Yeah, there's a cycle of natural disasters that I've noticed. And, you have droughts that sweep through, and then you have fires that sweep through. And those change the landscape, right? And so when the rains come, they sweep right over that changed landscape and cause flooding. So, it's really quite a cycle of disasters. And the ones who suffer the most are the farmers. We suffer by increased prices of the goods that we purchase, but it's the farmers and the ranchers that lose their herds, their livelihood, when they can't feed their animals, when they can't pull the crops out of the ground. And that's the kind of thing I want to address with my company.
That sounds fantastic. Could you talk a little bit about the actual product that you've made? I know it's very interesting because it's solar and wind powered and pretty self-sustainable for dealing with this problem.
Well, the portable feed platforms that I have designed are actually a self-contained unit that can land anywhere and essentially grow food inside them for animals that eat grass. Cattle, horses, sheep, goats, etc. we can grow from anywhere from 300 up to 4,000 pounds of food a day.
Wow.
And since we outfit them with solar and wind generation, they can work off grid. They can also carry their own water, and so they can operate up to 30 days without anybody. We just need one person. It's a one-person operation to harvest every day and to get the system ready for the next day. Doesn't take a lot of work, and it's a good source of nutrition and food for their animals.
Sounds very, very useful for that environment right now. Are you finding that there's a good reception to that since you've already been in this farming area? You've actually worked and done this in Kansas now. Are the other local farmers in your area being receptive to this, or how much hesitancy is there for them, or are they jumping on this right away because they realize it's a necessity?
It seems to be more of an age kind of thing. When the farmers that we engage that are like 45 or younger, they seem to embrace technology a lot easier than the older farmers. And the older farmers tend to remember, well, that's not how my father did it. That's not how my grandfather did it. And that becomes sort of a barrier for them. And so there's hesitancy there. And I mean, we could grow this grass with no light and a very minimal amount of water. We use about 95% less water than you would in a pasture to try and grow the same amount of food. And so, you give them those kind of facts, and their head rejects it a little bit.
Yeah, too good to be true.
Too good to be true. Where's the magic? Where's the trick?
Yeah.
So, but the farmers that are 45 and younger, they seem to be kind of anxious for solutions to this. They see that this problem is a brick wall that they can't get down. And once they lose their herd, they're done.
Yeah. So obviously you're based in Kansas still right now. Looking forward for the future of your company, where do you see the biggest areas you'd like to expand into, or what are some of the other farming communities you think that really need to be adopting maybe a type of this technology quickly?
Well, a couple of the things that we are expanding in right now is hydroponic farms where we're building units to grow fruits and vegetables. And that is actually a situation where if a farmer has bad land, we can actually give him an opportunity to consume give a small footprint and still be productive by providing lettuce, spinach, kale, strawberries, et cetera, et cetera. In addition, there is that hemp market out there. If the farmers want to explore a crop that is promising, then we have units that you can grow hemp in, laboratory quality hemp. And so you have to check your state laws to make sure that that's acceptable. But industrial hemp is coming on pretty strong. In addition, we are exploring right now with a couple of companies coming out with a water filtration system where inside one of these containers, we can actually filter out heavy metals, nitrates, and other bad things that is contaminating water and make that water reusable.
Wow.
So that's another problem that we're trying to address for farmers.
So obviously, again, you have the first-hand experience. You've already realized this yourself, that this is a problem you were going to be facing, so you've been addressing it. How are you finding, just because state-by-state policies are so different throughout the U.S., how are you finding policymakers are dealing with some of these agricultural problems that are coming? Are people paying attention to that, or what policies do you think need to be changed to better support technology changes, to better support addressing these issues in a better way?
Well, policies as far as the federal government is concerned, or state level? Is that what you're...
Either or, I guess.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is I think it's the tax code 179 depreciation laws that allow for equipment to be depreciated in 1 year. That has helped out sales a lot because the farmer or rancher can purchase one of my units and then depreciate it. And that helps out a whole lot. And that's the intent of that 179 law. In addition, I think there's a lot of grants available too. Farmers can tap into a lot of money that's available to them if they're educated on how to get to it. So I think they need to talk to their local extension. There's plenty of ag universities that are in touch with the grants and that they can actually apply for. They may not be a whole lot of money to some people, but they may make a huge difference to the small operator.
Yeah. Would you say that your company is looking more into the small operator right now, or are you trying to deal with the larger agricultural enterprises? Is it still going to be small for now and then build up? Or
that's a really good question. We have a really good system that is able to handle fairly easily the middle size, let's say 100 or 200 head of cattle, say, maybe up to 500 head of horses. But I originally designed these units, and I have them scaled based on size too, that, the small operators, there's a lot more of them out there. And so I want to put that technology in their hands. Yeah, I would love to get a 2,000 head dairy or something like that, but in reality, they're able to save themselves because they move a lot of more money, and they have a lot more resources available to them. But the small operators don't, and so my systems were made to save them.
Just because, again, you're seeing this series of patterns, and I mean, anyone who's paying attention to the news anywhere should be noticing that there is that series of patterns. There's a flood, then there's fires, then there's this. Basically, it happens consistently in certain areas everywhere each year. How much of a devastation do you think some of those, even the larger companies or smaller farmers, will need, or how much of a cost incentive or a cost disincentive will need to happen for them before a mass adoption of technology and changes takes place?
Well, we haven't seen it move yet, and we just had in the prairie states, I think it was 2017, had major fires go through Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. I mean, that was like 1 million acres and thousands and thousands and thousands of animals. And I've not heard of any legislation coming out to help them outside the normal ones of like the USDA coming in and helping them rebuild their fences. But, the farmer ends up having to rely on claiming insurance as well on his animals if he had them, insured.
Yeah.
And otherwise, he's out of business. And that, to me, is the worst. When you have farmers going out of business, there is a huge economic impact for that region. And I think there needs to be a change in perspective. The perspective on most of these states is that they are reactive. Emergency occurs, farmers are in distress, now we'll do something about it. Whereas they could be proactive. They could be looking at technologies like mine, and there's other ones that they could be looking at that they could be prepared beforehand so they could deploy them immediately upon the disaster occurring and save these farmers. So I think that's what the change I would like to see, is that these emergency services of the states become proactive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, again, we see that everywhere. I personally living in BC, forest fires here have become the regular and the norm. And again, each year it's a reactive measure, not a proactive measure to how we deal with that. So,
right.
I guess so. Just looking at 2019, we're getting into the summer season, and we're going to again see some of these probably disasters and things happen this year as well. It seems an inevitability at this point that we could have at least another, again, some floods or some drought or some fires again. What's the big goal for your company this year, and what do you want to see BioGen Ag sort of achieve for the 2019 season?
Well, I think that the more farmers that we touch base with, the better. I try to avoid. I'll be a bad CEO here. I try to avoid the dollar. Hey, I have to have $4 million this year. Instead, I'd rather touch 4 million farms.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I just, that's the mission of the company. Like I mentioned before, I actually was able to retire early. So this is really a mission for me, is to help these farmers and ranchers. And, I call my customers all the time. I rotate with them, even though they've already paid me. I still call them. How is it going? Is this, are you happy? Because I want a win-win. And so for me, it's just, I want to touch as many farmers' lives and save that agricultural lifestyle as possible.
I really like that. That seems, I don't know, I'm sure you could say, yeah, you're being a bad CEO, but I think that genuine response is something that's maybe lacking even in environmental companies, of saying that they, it should be a win-win for you guys. And again, you don't have a business model if all those farmers lose all their farms.
Right. And the governments don't understand it either. They just think that throwing money afterwards is the solution. But you can't afford to lose 2 or 3 big ranchers from a region, because the entire economy in the Midwest is really built around farms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you cannot lose them and think everything will be okay, because quite honestly, you could give that rancher several $100,000. Here, you lost all your animals. Here's your check. Go buy more. There's a chance he won't do that. He'll go to Florida. And so everyone that's left behind, they've lost everything too. So the next 2 or 3 years is super hard on them. That's why we have some ghost towns, because, there's a transition of economies.
Yeah.
And we can't do that with the agricultural economy.
Yeah. So I guess just because we are Investor Ideas and investors are sort of our listener base, what are some of the biggest factors you think an investor should consider when looking at, environmentally conscious companies such as yourself, and especially looking at agricultural tech? What are some of the things you think that they should be paying attention to as a positive or a negative?
Well, I think that they have to look at the mission. It doesn't make sense. And I think they need to listen to the company, because some companies may actually have their heart in the right place, but there's no way they're going to make money.
Yeah.
And so I understand that. That's why, I could give all my money away and it still wouldn't be enough. So I know that the company has to survive, has to make a profit so that I can continue to help farmers. And I think that's what, there's a fine connection, a handshake between the business people and maybe the mission. But there's many investors who are out there who agree with the mission, right? So, to help farmers, they understand that it's helping the local economies and even the regional economies to help these farmers in ag tech. And sometimes it's not a sexy solution, but if the farmers are buying into it, you can make a lot of money by helping the farmers. You just don't have to take everything they have in order to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. I think that's a smart point to make, that handshake between idealism and realism, right?
Yep.
It's been fantastic talking to you today, and I'm definitely going to keep an eye on your company, just because I do find that this is something, the problem you're trying to tackle is something that, again, affects a huge percentage of Middle America, and even, again, a lot of the prairie parts of Canada as well. And it's good to see that someone is out there actually trying to deal with this in a proactive way versus, again, just wait and see what happens, and hopefully it gets adopted at some point, right?
Right. Well, thank you so much, and I enjoy all the interviews I get, and I love talking to people who care about the same kind of things I care about. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah, thank you. And just before we go, there's no like recent news release or anything that you.
Well, we've started now reaching out internationally. We've actually been selling units into the Middle East. We're making inroads to Africa. Quite honestly, my passion flamed when I realized that some of the villages, say in Africa, that maybe have 20 goats, placed down one of my units, and now they could triple the size of their herds. That really excited me. So we are pursuing a partnership with some companies that provide water to villages, because that's really, I only need water because I can provide the electricity. And so I'm interested in helping transform their lives as well. So that's pretty exciting. But
that's very exciting.
We've broken into the hemp market. We've sold some units to states that are actually doing industrial hemp. We're also doing fruits and vegetables. So it's all pretty exciting right now.
Yeah, that sounds, the fact that you're working again in the Middle East and Africa is insanely exciting, because I couldn't agree more I've always wondered that if you can get solar power and wind power into those areas and get that crop production up, you could change their whole environment in a series of years.
Change their lives. I mean, forever. And then that excites me.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that also offers a lot of, that's a win for everybody on the global economy scale, because now we have countries that were sort of out of the mix for a long time who can actually start participating and being a healthier,
and producing. Right. Instead of being takers, they can take care of themselves.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much again for talking today, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on your company. It's fantastic.
All right. Thank you, Taylor.
That's all for today's podcast. To hear more podcasts, visit the podcast page at investorideas.com, www.investorideas.com/audio. And a reminder, you can also hear our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, and Google Play Music. To help, you can follow Track CleanTech Talks. InvestorIdeas.com has created directories of publicly traded companies in the sector. Visit investorideas.com/membership to learn more. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the investorideas.com website at investorideas.com/about/disclaimer.asp. And this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment.